Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, joined now by David Harrison, the host of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And David is here to fill us in on new Buffalo Bills tight end O.J. Howard, who obviously began his career in Tampa Bay. And David, let's start there. Let's start with the beginning. Take us back to 2017 when Tampa made O.J. Howard a first-round pick, number 19 overall. A lot of people, including myself, thought he would get drafted even higher than that. You know, Cam Brate's coming off of a really good breakout season. What were the expectations for Howard coming into the NFL, and how would you say he met those?
Yeah, it's interesting. I go back to that time, like you said. I think it was Matt Miller actually was the first person that I remember seeing have O.J. Howard mock drafted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I remember everybody, like nobody's innocent here. Every single person just murdered him over. It was like, there's no way that's going to happen. And then we fast forward to April, and that's absolutely what happens. And I would say it was about a 50-50 mix. Some people looked at it as a luxury pick that the team couldn't really afford to make because, you know, you're coming in that season, you kind of feel like you have a defense that you felt like you had a defense better than what it turned out to actually be. And you felt like Jameis Winston was kind of going to take that next step, and maybe OJ would help out in that. Of course, the way that everything went down was totally different. That's not all on OJ, obviously, but it just didn't really work out as planned. When OJ first came in, it was kind of strange because that's where a lot of the complaints came in, is you kind of said, you're not going to bring him in as your starter. Cam Brate, like you said, coming off that breakout season, he's going to be your tight end number one. So why are you using a draft pick on a tight end number two, who maybe in 2 or 3 years becomes your number one, depending on how much of his athleticism turns into actual NFL production? So that's where some of the gripes came in. A guy like me, I was in love with the upside, and I was kind of sold in on like Mike Smith, had rejuvenated his defensive career, and things were going to take off for the Buccaneers. Of course, we were two full seasons away from that entire coaching staff completely being out of the state of Florida. So it didn't go well, but that was kind of the feeling when we first came into it, is that OJ would take the back seat, eventually become the starter, and had top 5 tight end potential.
It's always tough when you are drafted as a player and then that coaching staff is gone very soon.
Yeah.
And then by the time OJ was done in Tampa, 3 different coaching staffs, right? With Mike Smith and Dirk Cutter right after him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Bruce Arians. And so I think while I think the first 3 seasons of OJ's career were decent, I don't think that he met anyone's expectation for the gifts that he had. I mean, just a rare talent in terms of size, athleticism. What do you think? I know I talked about the coaching staff switches already. What do you think some of those big contributing factors have been as to why O.J. Howard didn't reach his potential in Tampa?
I think pressure and confidence, honestly, is kind of what I build a lot of it up to. Again, that first year, it was kind of just come in and do the best you can. You're tight end number 2. You're going to do a lot of blocking. You're going to do some receiving. And we're really looking to kind of just showcase your talents in spots, right? And in a lot of those spots, you could see him flash. That's the term that we love to use, is he would flash. And you would see, you're like, okay, I see why we picked him. I see why he's on the field. And coaches were confident in what he was going to be able to do for the team. And then you kind of move forward down the line a little bit, and a little bit more flash comes out, a little bit more production comes out. And then you have the kind of the critical offseason where he goes on NFL Network, talks about how he wants to be a top 5 tight end in the NFL. He feels like he has the ability. Everybody's in love with him. ESPN loves him. NFL Network loves him. Everybody is just super high on O.J. Howard, and it just never came to fruition. I go back to his last real season, 2019, where he really kind of had, and this was the first year under Bruce Arians and that staff. It was really kind of the first kind of signs of the total breakdown, I want to say, not just physical health, concerns, which are obviously there, but I call it the Harlem Globetrotter play. He gets hit on a pass or in the red zone, playing the San Francisco 49ers in a situation where they can win this game. And again, there's a lot of hope surrounding this team, playoff potential and all this stuff. And he basically brings the ball in, but then he kind of around the world's around his back. And when it comes back forward, he essentially hands it to a 49ers defender. And that kind of marked the moment where everything kind of just fell apart in that game. Richard Sherman later ends up with a pick 6. Like it just all goes to hell in a handbasket. And it's tough because that's a team effort. Everybody knows that. But when you watch the game, that play is where it starts. So that you kind of feel like that's the catalyst. And honestly, I almost feel like that's the play that really kind of started to erode O.J. Howard's confidence and really derailed his potential.
I'm a little surprised that you haven't talked more about injuries to this
Yeah.
point in our conversation. What can you fill us in about when it comes to OJ, the injuries that he's dealt with, and maybe how it's affected him as a player? Like, have you seen him go through injuries and come back with a reduced athletic profile?
Yeah, I think you can say that, you know what I mean? But again, I kind of wonder how much of that is like stiffness from not being confident, and how much of that is a lack of willingness to, it's almost like trying too hard, right? There's an old saying that a former leader of mine once told me is you can't try to do something, either do it or you don't. And it kind of resembles Yoda's "there is no
Yeah.
try,"
Yeah.
I'm not a Star Wars guy, but I know Yoda said something similar. I don't know if he got it from Yoda. I'm going to be honest with you. I said that once on Locked On Bucs, and my co-host James Jarko is a huge Star Wars guy. He's
Oh
like,
no.
"Did he just steal a Yoda saying?" I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I kind of got outed for that too, and maybe that's where it came from. I don't know, but that's really what it kind of looks like. Is I feel like OJ Howard, some of that athleticism is still there. I think you're right, and injuries have been a big part of his story. But the thing that kind of takes me away from the injuries, as kind of blaming it on injuries, is they're not the same injuries, and they're not even the same type of injuries. They're almost two of his injuries, his first two injuries, are almost like fluke injuries that really you don't see much in the NFL, but they kind of both happen to the same guy, and it's just kind of weird and in different type of ways. But I really do. I feel like the pressure to be great, not just from the outside world, but from himself. I talked to him early on in his career. We did an interview with him and his father actually, and the drive to be great, which you always appreciate, right? But the drive to be great really stood out from that conversation. I think he just kind of had a lot of pressure, whether it was real or imagined, put on his shoulders. And as things continued to not go well, he just kept trying harder and harder and harder to make those things happen. And when I see him on the field, I almost kind of look at it as a guy who is so nervous to make the next mistake that he essentially puts himself in a position to make that mistake.
David, what you said there really resonates with me, and I'm going to offer a story here that nobody asked for. But
Yeah.
back in my previous line of work, I was managing an account, or I inherited an account that was a big one for the company, and it was not in a good place. And everybody kind of agreed that Joe was the right guy to step in here and help with the situation. And I knew what was at stake, and I wanted to save this particular account.
Hmm.
But because I pressed so hard,
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes. And there was one particular person that I had to deal with on that account that was always going to be the challenging person to deal with, and wound up having a very honest conversation with her. And I said, look, I'm going to be completely candid with you. I am not myself because I'm trying way too hard
Right.
to make you happy. And I'm making uncommon mistakes. And maybe that's just exactly what's happened with OJ Howard. And we say this all the time in sports, that sometimes guys just need a change of scenery.
Hmm.
And it
Yep.
feels like that's probably really honestly true when it comes to OJ Howard, which is weird because nobody's going to look at Tampa Bay with Bruce Arians and Tom Brady and playing with Rob Gronkowski, a Super Bowl team, and say
Yeah.
that that wasn't a good environment for him to realize his potential. But I think the whole story here of them inheriting him, that you know, that regime, and going through three coaching staffs and going into a situation where the tight end situation was kind of spoken for, all of that really impacted OJ. And
Yep.
there's reason to believe that his best football is still yet to be played.
Yeah, I think there is, and I really like the fit in Buffalo, and I'm really happy for him as a human being. I'm really kind of cheering for the person in OJ to really be successful, and I think going to a team that's not going to ask them to once again just boom be that number one guy, be that star playmaker that really kind of elevates the team, but more so be a part of what's going to elevate the team, be a part of the program, and it's a group effort, it's a group thing. It's not just on OJ, and it was never really just on OJ in Tampa either. But again, I just the way that he talked, the way that even his father talked at times about the expectations and the excitement of what was to come, it just kind of felt like it was kind of on the tracks, and you either were going to do it or you were going to fail. And I think that Buffalo is a really good spot for him. And yeah, we've been talking for the last couple of years, not just on our show, obviously, but I mean the Pewter Reports of the world, and guys over there, the Athletics guys, the Tampa Bay Times, about whether or not OJ was going to get traded, about whether or not this was going to be finally be a point where the organization and the player basically just kind of came to an agreement and said, look, we've done what we can at this point. We're done growing together. Let's go our separate ways, get some draft capital over here, you get a new start over there. It just never happened. Now it is happening. So again, for OJ, I'm very excited for what he can do, and really hoping that, like we you just mentioned, that untapped potential finally gets to get realized.
Seems like the arrival of Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski limited OJ Howard's ability to evolve and contribute in the offense. And so by the time they arrived, was there hope Howard could put it together? Because I remember some
Yeah.
quotes from Bruce Arians about, if they were going to trade OJ Howard, it would be only a first round pick would get that deal done. And then even another soundbite where he talked about, well, I guess we'll just play 3 tight ends.
Yeah. I mean, so 2019, when Bruce shows up, he's very excited about the roster that the Buccaneers have in place. He's very excited about some of the playmakers. OJ was definitely one of them, but he also made it a point to kind of let everybody know right up front that if you don't produce, and he's got his his mental mistakes checklist and everything else. If you make those mistakes, those are things that are going to pull you off of the field. And we've seen Ronald Jones kind of go through some of the same treatment. And as much as Bruce Arians is a supporter of his team and wants to put guys in the best position to be successful, he's also just as intense when he holds people accountable for the mistakes that they made. And again, that fumble, that Globetrotter fumble interception, it's an interception, but I call it like a Globetrotter
Yeah.
fumble because really shouldn't count on Jameis's record. That's one of those plays, you know what I mean? And you saw him kind of go and get relegated to a little bit of basically just a blocking tight end role, which I think OJ is a capable blocking tight end. I don't think it's his bread and butter. I think his bread and butter is being a versatile weapon, doing a little bit of both above average. But you really saw his role get relegated down to being a blocking guy. I was able to go down to Tampa to cover that game that year against the Arizona Cardinals, and I went in there specifically kind of with the assignment of tracking OJ's snaps, and I was amazed. If I remember the numbers correctly, by the end of the third quarter, he'd only run 3 routes, but he was on the field for almost the entire game. That's basically the role he had been moved to. When Rob came into the team, OJ initially got a really valuable opportunity, and if you go back through his history, that's the year he tore his Achilles, and he ended up missing a large chunk of the season, the Super Bowl season. That was really painful for me to watch because, again, I know the person to a certain extent, as much as somebody in my position can know a player. I know of him, and I've had a lot of interactions with him. He was on pace, Joe, at that point in time to set career highs across the board. Touchdowns, yards, receptions, targets, all of it. He was cooking with Tom. He was looking really good. A lot of that athleticism was starting to come back out. A lot of the confidence on the field looked like it was starting to come back. And then the injury happens. Then Rob Gronkowski eventually gets back into football shape and does what Gronk does best. And that opportunity was gone from that point forward. But you really feel like if OJ stays healthy, that, like we were talking with Bruce Arians, like we'll just run 3 tight ends out there. You really feel like if OJ stays healthy in 2020, maybe he is tight end number 2. Maybe Cam Brate ends up as tight end number 3. Or they basically just kind of share tight end number 2. Eventually, Gronk becomes Gronk, right? That's
Yeah.
that's an inevitable thing. But I really think if OJ stays healthy in 2020, I'm not saying necessarily he's with the Buccaneers, but I think the way he's leaving Tampa Bay is a little bit different.
So I'm glad you kind of teased that you have some really good working knowledge of OJ Howard, because from everything I've been able to gather about OJ Howard, he's a hard worker. He puts in the time. So what can you tell us about his football character and what he's been like as a teammate in Tampa?
I mean, his teammates seem to like him. You know what I mean? I haven't been able to see OJ in person in quite some time because of COVID. I was retiring from my previous career during the 2020 season, so that limited my ability to travel and see these guys. So it has been some time since I've been able to be kind of in there and close, and without the cameras kind of shining on everybody, and in the arena where they're kind of performing, right? But the OJ that I know is he's enjoyed by his teammates. No, nobody's gonna call him lazy. Nobody's gonna say he's a disruption. And there were times where we had conversations where you kind of have to know that OJ is not so much unhappy to the point where he's just kind of bitter, but just understanding that this isn't the future. And I go back to Shaquille Barrett when he joined the Buccaneers. We asked him, when did you know your time in Denver was up? And we kind of expected the canned answer, like, oh, after the season we weighed some things that. No, he said a year and a half before. He said 18 months prior, he knew his future was not going to be in Denver anymore. I think OJ, if he's ever honest about it, or asked about it, is probably in the same boat. He probably knew when he got injured in 2020, maybe even, that basically his clock as a Buccaneer was going to begin expiring. So the biggest thing for OJ again is, can he recover his confidence? Can he recover the ability to play within the scheme, play within his natural ability? The Achilles injury, he was praised for his ability to come back from it as strongly as he did. But outside of practices, which again in 2020, 2021, 21 because of COVID, 2020 because of my own career situation, I didn't get to see that. So post Achilles, that's the big question that I can't answer for you is how does he look like that? Because you just didn't get a big body of work from him on the field to see that. And that was where my vantage point was from.
David, let's apply all of this to the Buffalo Bills now. He
Yeah.
comes into this team as the tight end too. I mean, Dawson Knox with his breakout year in chemistry with Josh Allen, he's the guy, but there's a lot of belief that the Bills under Ken Dorsey at offensive coordinator will go with more 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field. And I think giving OJ Howard the contract that they did is a good signal that that will be true and that he will play and be a factor for this offense. And so what do you think the Buffalo Bills can reasonably count on when it comes to OJ Howard as a tight end too?
Just a hard contribution. And this is why I like the fit in Buffalo so much because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from the outside looking in, this looks like a very communal system. Yeah. It's not on any one guy. Like I look at Stephon Diggs and with the Minnesota Vikings, he was the man, but he was also the man in every way, shape, or form. Like if the offense wasn't humming, everybody looked at Stephon Diggs like, well, what was going on over here? Or Adam Thielen, what was going on over here? With Buffalo, from the outside, right? Oh, well, Josh Allen missed this or Josh Allen threw this interception. But it feels like internally in that organization, it's very much we gather around each other and we gather around for each other. That's what OJ needs. And I think that's what's going to help OJ be successful in Buffalo is being a part of the system instead of having to be a featured member of the system. And if that's what happens, and if I'm correct in that atmosphere, I think that'll help start to rebuild OJ's football playing the mental side of thing. I don't want to call it the yips because that's more of a baseball term, but I think that'll start to repair a little bit of that. Some early success. One of the best plays in his NFL career happened in Buffalo. I was there when that happened. And again, just knowing the young man, super excited for him at that point. But again, things just kind of went downhill from there. But if I'm correct in that atmosphere and that the Buffalo Bills organization is a very kind of communal, we win together, we lose together. Truly, everybody says it, but we both know that's not how it is everywhere. If that's what it is, I think that's the prime spot for OJ to regrow his career.
David, let's end on this. Let's talk about those Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, what's the vibe? I mean, this is crazy. Tom Brady's
Super Bowl,
back.
baby.
You thought you were rebuilding. You thought you were covering a team that was going to rebuild and find some weird quarterback. No, Tom Brady's back. The NFC is it's wide open, right? We can all agree there. What boxes are left for the Buccaneers to check this offseason?
Defensive depth and offensive line depth. That's where they're going to get bit. And I mean, every team has a weakness. Every team is shallow somewhere. You can't possibly be deep everywhere. The question always is the injury bug going to hit you where you're not deep, or is it going to hit you where you are deep? And then you go into the postseason and you look at the Tristan Wirfs injury, and then that really is just the worst timing possible for that sort of an injury to happen. And then you look at the defense losing Jordan Whitehead to the New York Jets. I like Mike Edwards and how he steps in, but you still feel like that secondary needs some help. So maybe an elder free agent in the second or third wave of free agency, maybe an NFL draft choice that I like Jalen Petrie out of Baylor. I don't know, Joe, you're a TDN guy, so you can tell me better. I mean, I see projections all over the place for all these players, except for like Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know what a realistic spot for Jalen Petrie to get drafted is, but if the Buccaneers can land a guy like that, I would be very happy with the potential that I see as a non-draft expert. But that's really where I see it is secondary depth, offensive line depth. If they can add some pieces there, then I feel a lot better with what they have moving forward. But I mean, the expectation is Super Bowl. The Rams look like the only real competition, especially with Devontae heading to Vegas.
Yeah, what the world, man.
And I predicted Bills and Bucks in the Super Bowl last year, Joe. I told my buddy Charlie Messer, a very devoted listener of yours and probably viewer of yours now on YouTube, that, hey, man, I told him, looks like I predicted Bucks Bills 1 year too early. So I think 2022, 2023 is the year it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, we could have had it. We could have had it.
OJ's going to be there.
Yeah, OJ's going to be there. And hopefully both you and I are going to be
Absolutely.
there. And next February, we are having a lot of conversations just like this, but obviously with a lot more at stake. So he's David Harrison, ladies and gentlemen. You can follow him on Twitter at DHarrison82, Locked On Bucs podcast, and does great work covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We appreciate all of your time and expertise here today on the podcast, David.
Appreciate you, Joe. Thank you.